Can your consciousness time travel, encounter other non-human intelligences, travel to higher planes of reality, completely leave your physical body? Well, intelligence agencies like the CIA and DIA certainly thought so. Enough to finance decades of classified projects investigating consciousness, psychic phenomena, and yes, out-of-body states. But surely they didn't share exactly how to do it. Or did they? As some of you know, we've been on something of a saga when it comes to the Monroe Institute and the Gateway process here on the channel. On that note, this is the third and final part of my full read-through of this brain-melting document, and I think it really is the most mind-blowing climactic part of it all, because the document here gets practical, and the takeaways at the end of this thing are just, well, you're gonna see. Perhaps I'm biased, but I do heavily recommend you go back and check out my experience with the Gateway process at the Monroe Institute. This video also gets into the just unbelievable history surrounding all of this stuff with the intelligence agencies and Robert Monroe himself. And you definitely will not want to miss parts 1 and 2 of this read-through if you haven't already checked them out. And with that, let's dive back into the document. Before I forget though, like, subscribe, comment, share, I do appreciate it, and that algorithm must be fed. All right, friends, commencing the third and final parts of this full read-through of the Gateway process document, starting with point 26, quality of consciousness. We noted earlier that the out-of-body state involves projection of a major portion of the energy pattern that represents human consciousness so that it may move either freely throughout the terrestrial sphere for purposes of information acquisition or into other dimensions outside of space-time, perhaps to interact with other forms of consciousness within the universe. Consciousness is the organizing and sustaining principle that provides the impetus and guidance to bring and keep energy in motion within a given set of parameters so that a specific reality will result. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness, as does the Absolute, but in case of the latter, it is a function of energy and its associated quality of consciousness in infinity, omniscience and omnipotence in perceptual unity. When energy returns to a state of total rest within the Absolute, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex an energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. Our consciousness, therefore, is that differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness which resides within the Absolute. It accounts for the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but it is distinctly separate from and superior to it, since consciousness exists quite apart from and outside of reality, beyond the bounds of time-space. It is like the Absolute. It, like the Absolute, has neither beginning nor end. Reality has both a beginning and an end because it is bounded within time-space, but the fundamental quantum energy and its associated consciousness is eternal. When reality ends, its constituent energy simply returns to infinity and the Absolute. Fascinating stuff. Again, I have questions about this relationship between human consciousness and the Absolute, but you still see this notion in really cutting-edge ideas in this sort of philosophy of consciousness, right? That there is this aspect of human consciousness that is not bound by space-time, that is immortal, that exists outside the confines of space-time. I mean, these are all ideas that you'll find in, like I said, really cutting-edge physics of consciousness thinkers. Again, Dr. Donald Hoffman, Bernardo Kastrup, Federico Fagin, they all have some version of this, that, you know, these rules, this world that we live in is not the absolute reality, or at least consciousness is not bound to that reality. Like in the case of somebody like Federico Fagin, he has this notion that human consciousness is both quantum and classical, that there is this immortal part of our consciousness that resides outside of space-time, just like they're saying in this paper. So, interesting stuff. Okay, point 27, consciousness in perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the Absolute, we are faced with a question. So what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with it all the memories it has accumulated through experience in reality. The return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute without losing the separate identity and accumulated self-knowledge which its memories confer upon it. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy in motion. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is in fact projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory which constitutes the ultimate form of his identity, to let it play in and learn from dimensions both inside and outside the time-space world in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. Fascinating stuff. Again, there's definitely overlaps with a lot of ancient esoteric and spiritual traditions here, but I'm really curious, how they came to this conclusion about really the ultimate fate of the human's immortal consciousness, right? That it will somehow preserve a sense of individuality, yet also merge with the absolute, with the immortal consciousness hologram that underlies reality. I'm not mad at it. I like it, but I do have questions. It's really reminiscent of some of the Platonic and Hermetic ideas, right? Like in the really both Hermetic and Platonic traditions, there's this idea that, human consciousness can be reborn into the nous, the divine mind or the logos. So yeah, hard not to think about that here. All right, 28. Now we're going to start getting into slowly and surely the methodology in and of itself. So 28, gateway method. Having put the gateway experience in context by postulating a structural outline of how and why it seems to work, and having shown what it is designed to achieve, the time has come to examine the specific techniques which comprise the gateway process. These techniques are designed to enable the user of the gateway tapes to manipulate the high energy states, which can be achieved if the user continues to work with the tapes over a period of time. The amount of time required to reach advanced energy states and to fully exploit all the techniques varies with the individual. The sensitivity of his nervous system, his general state of mind, and the extent to which he may have previously developed facility in related techniques such as transcendental meditation are all pertinent factors affecting the speed at which he may expect to progress. The gateway process begins by teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an energy conversion box. Next, the participant is introduced to a method of encouraging his mind and body to strive to achieve a state of resonance through utterance of a single tone, a monotonous, contracted humming sound that sets up a feeling of vibration, particularly in the head. He engages in this resonant tuning, as it is called, by humming along with a chorus of such sounds that are contained on the gateway tape. Following this, the participant is exposed to the gateway affirmation and is encouraged to repeat it to himself as he hears it repeated on the tape. This affirmation is a statement to the effect that the individual realizes that he is more than merely his physical body and that he deeply desires to expand his consciousness. Yeah, this is interesting. So this is essentially, again, it's an outline of one of the very first things you do when you're doing the gateway method. And really you do this every time. You use this energy conversion box method, which is like, you put anything you don't want to bring with you into the meditation, your fears, your anxieties, whatever it is, you really visualize putting those things in the box and leaving them there so they don't interfere with your meditation. Then you do this resonant tuning, which is, imagine it's like chanting, but you're not saying anything. You're just like following along with these like, oh, kind of intonations on the tape. And then the final part is this affirmation, saying like, I'm more than my physical body, and because I am more than my physical body, I can explore non-physical states, etc., etc. So yeah, that's pretty much exactly what you learn in the retreat as well. Hemisync introduced, 29. After that, he is exposed for the first time to the hemisync sound frequencies and is encouraged to focus on and develop a perception of and appreciation for those feelings which accompany the synchronization of brainwaves that results. Next comes the technique of progressive and systematic physical relaxation, while the hemisync frequencies are expanded to include additional forms of pink and white noise designed to put the physical body at a virtual threshold of sleep, as well as to calm the left hemisphere of the mind while raising the right hemisphere to a state of heightened attentiveness. Once all of this is achieved, the participant is invited to envisage the creation of a, quote, energy balloon comprised of an energy flow beginning at the center of the top of the head and extending down in all directions to the feet. The energy involved in this flow then proceeds up through the body and back into the balloon pattern again. The energy balloon, which sets up a pattern very reminiscent of the cosmic egg discussed earlier, not only enhances bodily energy flow and encourages early achievement of a suitable resonance state, but it is also designed to provide protection against conscious entities possessing lower energy levels, which the participant might encounter in the event that he achieves an out-of-body state. It serves as a precautionary purpose in the unlikely event that the participant's first out-of-body experience involves direct projection outside the terrestrial sphere. Interesting. So, again, all of these things are parts of what you learn at the Gateway Retreat, except I don't recall them specifically ever discussing. So let me back up. You definitely do this resonant energy balloon practice, just like those other things that you do at the beginning of every meditation. But they never specifically say that this is like a protective bubble necessarily. So that's interesting. And yeah, it really makes me think of my own experience with, surprisingly, going out of body. But anyway, yeah, I'll put a pin in that there. All right, 30 advanced techniques. Having achieved focus 10, the participant is now ready to endeavor to achieve a state of sufficiently expanded awareness to begin actually interacting with dimensions beyond those associated with his experience of physical reality. This state is called Focus 12 and involves conscious efforts on his part, while additional forms of pink and white noise enter the sound stream being directed into his ears from the gateway tape. Once the participant has achieved this state of greatly expanded awareness, he is ready to begin employing a series of specific techniques or tools, as the Monroe Institute characterizes them, which enable him to manipulate his newly found expanded awareness to obtain practical, useful feedback of value for promoting self-discovery and personal growth. The specific techniques involved are described individually below. So let's reflect on this really quick, because now they're introducing this idea of focus levels, and they do specifically cover focus levels later. Specifically, Focus 15 and Focus 21 have their own kind of bullet points, but it seems like they sort of skip over explaining what Focus 10 is. They just mention it. So that's the first primary focus level that you work with when you do these tapes. Focus 10 is called the mind awake, body asleep state, and that's really what it feels like. And then, as they say here, Focus 12 is supposed to be expanded awareness. It's supposed to get you into this state where, like it says, you can begin to work with other energy systems. I'm going to be blunt and say that, to me, that's kind of nebulous as a practitioner. Am I a super advanced gateway practitioner? I guess not. You know, I did do a gateway retreat where we did dozens of meditations. We spent a lot of time in Focus 12, relatively. But to me, that state largely feels like there's this energetic rushing throughout the body. And yes, there are some, things encountered in the mind's eye. So maybe that's what they mean by encountering other energy systems. And if you're interested in more on specifically what I experienced in the video that I've been plugging at the beginning of all of these read-throughs, I do have this sort of journal entry type shares that I was doing during the retreat, in which I get into the specifics of what I experienced. All right, 30A now, problem solving. This technique involves identifying fundamental problems which the individual wishes to see solved, fulfilling his expanded awareness with his perception of these problems, and then projecting them out into the universe. In this way, the individual enlists the assistance of what Monroe calls his, quote, higher self, in other words, his expanded consciousness, to interact with the universal hologram to obtain the information required to solve the problem. This approach may be used to solve personal difficulties, technical problems in the realm of physics, mathematics, etc., practical administrative problems, and so on. Responses to the problem-solving technique may be received almost immediately, but often they come based on developing intuition over the next 2 to 3 days. Frequently, the response comes in the form of a sudden holistic perception in which the individual suddenly finds that he simply knows the answer in all of its ramifications and completely in context, sometimes without even being able to put his newly found perception into words, at least initially. In some cases, the response may even arrive in the form of visual symbols, which the individual will, quote, see with his mind while he is in the Focus 12 state, and which he will have to interpret after he returns to normal consciousness. So this is interesting, and as I was reading this kind of just occurred to me. I don't feel like we specifically did this too much at the retreat, but then again, we did enter into certain meditations with questions or things we were interested in exploring, so I think that's what this is alluding to here, but we didn't specifically, from my memory, get into this idea of interacting with the higher self in this way. I know they do other, more advanced retreats that seem to be more oriented toward connecting with the higher self or connecting with your guidance, which I'm very intrigued in and would really like to do one of those retreats, by the way. So yeah, more that I would like to explore on this point. All right, patterning. This technique involves the use of consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, or intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in a Focus 12 state. Extension of the individual's perception of that objective into the whole expanded consciousness and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired objective is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness create holograms which represent the situation we desire to bring to an end. Bring about, and in so doing, establish the basis for actual realization of that goal. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the destined objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in space-time as it applies to us, if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. We did do a patterning exercise at my retreat. It's very similar to the more kind of modern idea of manifestation. I think there are some important differences. Viewers of the channel may have sort of intuited that I don't think it's a stretch to say that I have a distaste for manifestation in a lot of its forms. You know, it can kind of take on this vapid sort of materialistic connotation a lot of the time. And I guess that's on an individual by individual basis. And maybe I'm straw manning it here, but that's my 2 cents. All right, 30C, color breathing. The next technique is called color breathing and is designed to use the expanded awareness and highly focused attentiveness associated with Focus 12 state to imagine various colors in particularly intense and vivid manner, so as to use them to resonate and in turn activate the body's own energies. Fundamentally, in terms of practical application, it is a healing technique which is designed to restore the body and to enhance its physical capabilities by balancing, revitalizing, and reattuning bodily energy flows. It is predicated on the principle that the body's electromagnetic field is capable of altering its resonance pattern so as to entrain energy from the Earth's electromagnetic field for its own use. The various colors envisaged in the imagination as part of the technique cue the mind as to which frequencies and what specific amplitudes are desired in connection with this entrainment and the subsequent alterations in bodily energy flow patterns. That color has the capacity to affect the human mind is well known, and the effectuality of color in certain kinds of healing is a demonstrable fact. For example, application of an intense blue light to an area of physical tumescence leads to a relatively rapid and easily observable reduction in the swelling, while red and to a lesser effect yellow have quite the opposite effect. However, in the Hemisync application of the technique, external light sources are not involved, but rather the mind is the sole agent of the healing and revitalization. Interesting. So again, we did a little bit of this in the retreat, but this is really providing a lot more theory on it here. So yeah, would like to know more about this too. All right, D, energy toolbar. Fond memories of this one. And by fond memories, I mean I definitely fell asleep, or if you want to be romantic about it, clicked out for most of this meditation. Anyway, energy bar tool. Magic wands and enchanted scepters have been part of the folklore and occult practices of many cultures. The scepters, staffs, and maces carried by monarchs and high priests alike occur with such frequency in the history of bygone eras as to suggest, at the very least, that these items are aspects of some type of archetypal symbol which the human mind seems to appreciate, perhaps quite subliminally. In any case, the energy bar tool technique involves envisaging a small, intensely pulsating dot of light which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for purposes of healing and revitalization. I mean, from the sound of it, you'd think this would be something I love, and I do love the idea of it. But it was anyway, anyone who's done the meditation, you probably know what I mean. All right, E, remote viewing. In addition, the energy bar tool is used as a portal for initiating a follow-up technique called remote viewing. In this context, the participant turns his bar of energy into a whirling vortex through which he sends his imagination in search of new and illuminating insights. The apparent purpose of the symbolism involved in the vortex seems to be to cue the subconscious and convey to it instructions as to what the participant wishes to do in terms of nonverbal symbols, which the right hemisphere of the mind is capable of understanding. Interesting. We did not do this at the retreat. No remote viewing. Again, that is something that there are like whole retreats dedicated to, but yeah, obviously a very interesting topic and one that I've explored on the channel, but not personally, at least yet. F, living body map. This technique provides amplification for application of the energy bar tool as a means of healing specific areas or systems of the human body. The configuration of the participant's body is imagined, and then the various major systems of the nervous and circulatory systems are envisaged in appropriate colors within the confines of the outline being held in the imagination. The energy bar tool is then applied to energizing, balancing, and healing in whatever manner the participant desires. In the process, the participant visualizes various streams of colored energy flowing out of the tool into the organ system or area upon which the revitalizing or healing application is being made. Since colors are the result of differing wavelengths of light, which is to say energy at various frequencies, this technique operates on the assumption that the human body is composed of energy. It can be vitalized and healed through the additive application of additional energy provided that the energy provided, I guess there should be a comma, that the energy is applied in the appropriate form. Cookin, page 22, just a few pages left. Focus 15, travel into the past. So interesting right off the bat, they don't say focus 15 is travel into the past. at the retreat. They refer to it as I believe, like a realm of timelessness where you are beyond time. So there is talk of time, but not specifically travel into the past. So this is interesting. This is something that must have evolved since this was written, or they want to divert from that explanation for some reason. I don't know. All of the preceding techniques are conducted at the level of expanded awareness known as Focus 12. However, the technique of time travel into the past involves further expansion of consciousness through the inclusion of additional levels of sound on the Hemisync tapes. Some of the sound is probably merely an intensification of the basic Hemisync frequencies being designed to further modify brainwave frequency and amplitude. Other aspects of the added sound patterns appear to be designed to provide subtle, almost subliminal suggestions to the mind as to what is desired by way of further expanded consciousness, so as to support the verbal suggestions and instructions also contained on the tape. Even the instructions are highly symbolic, with time being visualized as a huge wheel in the universe with various spokes, each of which gives access to a different part of the participant's past. Focus 15 is a very advanced state, and it is extremely difficult to achieve. Probably less than 5% of all participants in any given gateway experience actually fully achieve the Focus 15 state during the course of the approximately 7 days of training. Nonetheless, Monroe Institute trainers affirm that with enough practice, eventually Focus 15 can be achieved. They also state that not only the individual's past history is available for examination by one who has achieved Focus 15, but other aspects of the past with which the individual himself has had no connection may also be accessed. Super interesting. Our Focus 15 meditations, to my memory, did not investigate this multi-spoked time wheel thing, but this is really cool. And it also drives home the core idea that you do have to practice these focus levels many, many times to really achieve what they're talking about here. So, useful information. And now, once again, moving on to Focus 21, the future. They, again, at the retreat, do not describe Focus 21 as the future. They refer to it as a bridge between worlds, which is equally kind of esoteric and cool, but different. Focus 21. The last and most advanced of all focus states associated with the Gateway Training Program involves movement outside of the boundaries of space-time, as in Focus 15, but with attention to discovering the future rather than the past. The individual who has achieved this state has reached a truly advanced level, except in unusual circumstances it is probably not attainable except by those who have conditioned themselves through long application of meditation, or by those who have practiced long and hard through use of the Hemisync tapes for a period of months, if not years. And if you're wondering, okay, so then what is it like to do these techniques if you're not attaining the state? Deep relaxation feels like deep meditation. You're definitely on the precipice of waking and sleeping a lot of the time. There are oftentimes like mind's eye, qualitative visuals coming in. Not on the intensity of like taking a tryptamine or a psychedelic or something, but it's still in that direction. It's very dreamy, it's very relaxed, subtle, with occasional punctuations of things that really reveal themselves to you. I'll just leave it at, your mind is like this huge MC Escher fractal labyrinth, and unless you get in there and really get in the lab, really explore the mind forest, you have no idea what's possible. All right, 31, out-of-body movement. This remarkable phenomenon has been saved for discussion in detail until last because of the interest which it occasions and special circumstances involved in its attainment. Monroe Institute stresses that the Gateway Program was not established solely for the purpose of enabling participants to obtain the out-of-body state, nor does the program guarantee that most participants will succeed in doing it during the course of the training at the Institute. Only one tape out of many which make up the Gateway experience is devoted to the technique involved in the out-of-body movement. Basically, these techniques are merely designed to make it easier for the individual to achieve the out-of-body state when his brainwave pattern and personal energy levels have reached a point that he is in apparent harmony with his surrounding electromagnetic environment, such that he feels that he has reached the threshold where separation is a possibility. To facilitate achieving the out-of-body state, Bob Monroe, the founder of the Monroe Institute, is quoted in a recent magazine article saying that, in order to assist the participant, the particular Hemisync tape concerned with that technique employs beta signals of around 2,877.3 CPS cycles per second, since 30 to 40 CPS is considered to be the normal range for beta brainwave signals, those associated with the wakeful state. It is apparent that the Monroe Institute is convinced that the same heightened state of brainwave frequency output which promotes altered states of consciousness is also an important consideration in assisting in out-of-body states. The actual techniques employed for separating from the body involve such simple maneuvers as rolling out, lifting out after the fashion of a telephone pole, wherein the individual separates in the rigid head-first manner, such that he finds himself standing at attention at the foot of his physical body and sliding out through either end of his body. Yep. Going out of body, as out there as it sounds, it is possible. It did happen to me. It's not because I'm some, deeply qualified person who really earned it. Ever since it's happened, I've been saying it's sort of like I slipped on a banana peel into the state. Was I doing tons of meditation? Yes. Was I playing with the borders of my consciousness and wakefulness and, all of the things that are being talked about in this? Yes, I was. Did I achieve the out-of-body state purposefully and through deliberate effort? No, it just kind of happened. I won't go into that whole story now. Again, watch the same video that I've been referring to if you want to see everything that led up to it and what happened. All right, 32, role of REM sleep. This one's a chunk. It is interesting to note that Bob Monroe informed the Gateway class that finished on the 7th of May 1983 that an ex-trainer of his operating in Charlottesville, Virginia, found that he could guarantee out-of-body movements by bringing participants down to a rapid eye movement state of sleep, and then use of the Hemisync tape technique. This may well be a function of the fact that most, if not all people, reputedly go into an out-of-body state during REM sleep. REM sleep is the deepest possible level of ordinary sleep and involves complete disengagement of the body's motor cortex functions from the neck down and nearly complete suppression of consciousness in the left hemisphere of the brain. The effect of this is to put the body in a state of complete stillness so far as the skeletal muscle structure is concerned, thereby further promoting the state of deep rest needed to eliminate the bifurcation echo. In addition, it leaves the right hemisphere of the brain free to respond to the instructions and suggestions contained on the Gateway tape. However, use of the Hemisync tapes at this point may be less a factor in actually achieving the out-of-body state than it is a matter of focusing the brain enough so that the residual memory of having naturally achieved the out-of-body state is carried into the waking state. Again, it may even be postulated that some dreams associated with deep levels of sleep are in fact functions of the same kind of altered consciousness involved in interaction with the universe that plays a role in all of the focus 12, 15, and 21 states described above. The difference between those states and the condition of the mind in REM sleep seems to be that the left hemisphere is almost totally disengaged in the latter experience, such that the memory of what was achieved in the altered states of consciousness cannot usually be retrieved by conscious desire because the left hemisphere has no knowledge of its existence or its location in the right hemisphere. Admittedly, some people can be trained to remember their REM state dreams through intense conditioning in the waking state, but even that may be more a function of establishing pathways in the right hemisphere, which the left hemisphere can access following re-entry into the wakeful state, than it is an indication of any specific left hemisphere conscious involvement in the process during REM sleep. In any event, the three apparent conditions required for voluntarily inducing an out-of-body state in most individuals seems to be 1. Achievement of a state of profound quiet in the body, such that the bifurcation echo fades and resonance at approximately 7 Hz is established. 2. Synchronization of the two brain hemisphere wave patterns. And 3. Subsequent stimulation of the right hemisphere of the mind to attain a state of heightened alertness, which of course interferes with brain hemisphere synchronization, but not until a sufficient level of enhanced frequency range has first been established to help achieve out-of-body state, the out-of-body state. All right, yes, REM sleep deeply seems to be important for going out of body. A few quick notes to emphasize and touch on here. Robert Monroe does say that people go out of body unconsciously often, if not every night, during really, really deep sleep states, so deep that you have no conscious memory of doing it. And, they also touch on here the importance of basically having the physical body completely shut down so that this other body, or whatever you want to call it, is online, and that when you try to move the physical body, it's not the physical body that moves, it's this other body. And that's what happened to me. Like, I was in this extraordinarily vivid, so I guess I'm going into the story now, during the meditation where I slipped into the out-of-body state, I was in an extraordinarily vivid, kind of lucid dream or clicked out state where I felt like I was in this room. Like, I'm just chilling in this meditation, very relaxed, having a really lovely, relaxed time. Nothing particularly strange happening though. And then suddenly I'm just like, a finger snaps and I am literally feel like I'm standing in a room looking out a window, and it feels incredibly real, incredibly, just tactile, everything. But I realize, like, no, I'm not in this room. I'm meditating in the check unit in the bed at Monroe Institute. And then my awareness goes back to my physical body. I'm fully like, okay, here I am meditating again. But I'm feeling this intense rushing of energy that they talk about, that Robert Monroe talks about, that's probably been touched on in this paper. And, that intense rushing is almost uncomfortable. So I try to move my physical body. My physical body doesn't move. I feel the separation of the non-physical self come off my body, lift off the body. It's absolutely surreal. It's absolutely just indisputable. It's not one of those things. It's like, maybe I went out. No, it's like you got in a car accident. It's like someone slapped you in the face. It's as real as anything you can experience. I'll leave it at that. 33, information collection potential. The information acquisition potential associated with the out-of-body state seems to attract the most attention from the standpoint of developing practical applications for the gateway technique. Unfortunately, although the out-of-body state can apparently be achieved by many people without excessive expenditure of time or effort, the purposes to which it can be put are currently limited by the fact that although individuals in that state may travel anywhere on an instantaneous basis in either the terrestrial or in other spheres, information distortion in the former context remains a major concern. To date, according to one of the trainers at Monroe Institute, numerous experiments have been conducted involving persons moving from one coast to the other in an out-of-body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most have acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. This seems to be a function of the fact that the physical reality in the present is not the only holographic influence which the individual may encounter in an out-of-body state. There are also energy patterns left by people or events occurring at the same physical site being viewed, but from the past rather than the present. In addition, since thoughts are the product of energy patterns and energy patterns are reality, it may also be possible that individuals encounter thought forms while in the out-of-body state, which mingle with physical reality and are not easily differentiated. Finally, as Melissa Yeager writes, there is another potential problem area in the sense that holograms can be viewed pseudo-scoptically. That is to say, inside out or backwards, just as well as they can be seen in proper perspective. Some of the distortions occurring may ultimately prove to be traceable to this cause because in the out-of-body state, an individual may perceive the holographic energy patterns given off by people or things interacting in space-time reality in a somewhat distorted form. So this is the kind of stuff that's absolutely above my pay grade. I did not leave my little room at the Monroe Institute. So the phenomenology of what that is really like, I don't know. And, I think, if you're a skeptic, you could just say, well, yeah, of course they couldn't get all 10 of those digits right because this is a bunch of bullshit, or this isn't real, or this is a dream of some kind. But I think that's straw manning. I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that we should at least take this seriously and at least take this plausibly because of so many people that have experienced this state. And I know of specific instances as well where people were able to, see things on other people's tables, for instance, at the Monroe Institute. Check out Chris Ramsey's video. His friend is able to kind of like remote view in an out-of-body state something in someone else's room. And again, of course, these are anecdotes. Anyway, I don't think we should straw man it. I think we should at least take it as a serious possibility that this can be done. All right, 34, belief system considerations. In 1967, Alexandra David Neal and Liam Yongden, or rather Lama, wrote a book titled The Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects, from which the following quote is taken. Quote, "The tangible world is movement, say the masters, not a collection of moving objects, but movement itself. There are no objects in movement. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. They are nothing but movement. This movement is continued, an infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy. In Tibetan, the word tsal, T-S-A-L, or shog, S-H-O-U-G, is used. All objects perceptible to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect they may assume, are constituted by a rapid succession of instantaneous events. The classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in the Hindu Sutra, which says, quote, "In the heaven of Indra, there is said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you will see all the others reflected in it." Yes, Indra's net of jewels. Love it. I have cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with the ancient writings of Eastern religions. See, that's interesting because immediately I think of the Greek Orphic egg. I'll flash that up on the screen here. Nor are their theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. The concept of visible reality, i.e. the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Yeah, I think this would be like the Ein Sof of the Kabbalists. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute presented in this paper. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-consciousness resident in that energy providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality corresponds with the sun. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the Absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity. Typo here maybe? That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity. Still exists outside space and time, but is one step removed from the Absolute and is the actual agent of all creation and reality. And the eternal thought or concept of self which results from this self-consciousness serves the Absolute as the model around which the evolution of space-time revolves to ultimately attain a reflection of and union with him. That thought model, which perfectly reflects the essence or spirit of the Absolute, fits the Christian metaphysical description of the Holy Spirit. Finally, our description of the universal hologram, the torus of creation and evolution, is neither new nor original. Its use as the figure of the universe of creation developing in evolution is found in various stylized representations in virtually every religious system of antiquity, whether the Eastern or Western derivation. Whether it's the stylized labyrinth once popular in the Hellenic world, the spiraled version of the Hebrew tree of life, or its Hindu counterpart, or the Chinese spiral through the fourfold powers, the ultimate meaning is the same. Mystics the world over, it seems, have perceived the universal hologram in the same spiral form and have incorporated that intuitive knowledge in their religious writings from antiquity to the present. Woo! Some chunky run-on sentences once again, but I love the sentiment here that there is this universal wisdom, there is this perennial philosophy that all rivers lead to the same ocean, and that all these mystics were on to this same truth, that there is this universal consciousness, this absolute, or if you want to call it God, you can call it God. I would have loved them to plug the Platonists and the Hermeticists, because it definitely fits with their metaphysics too. But I'll forgive you, Lieutenant Colonel McDonald. 35 left brain limitations. 20th century physics would seem to be revisiting insights belonging to mankind as far back as written records take us. The only difference is that 20th century physics is using a left brain linear quantitative style of reasoning to approach the same knowledge, which the mystics of old apparently acquired in a holistic intuitional right brain style. As a tool for achieving the intuitive holistic type of interface with the universal hologram needed to provide the context that thinkers like Einstein have sought in their labors to discover a unified field theory in physics. What is this sentence? Seriously. As a tool in the hands of our left brain culture, Gateway would seem to be a promising method for achieving the intuitive holistic type of interface with the universal hologram needed to provide the context that thinkers like Einstein have sought in their labors to discover a unified field theory of physics. Again, I emphasize, I really love you, Mr. Wayne McDonald, but I break up these sentences. I mean, travel back in time 40 years using the method and break up these sentences a little more. For persons in our profession whose concerns revolve around strategic issues, tactical questions, and matters of managerial form and system, access to a new world of intuitive perception and self-reflection would seem to offer, in the long term, the means by which to know in a truly objective way. I'm going to stop commenting on the sentences, I promise, but come on. This is so because the self-imposed limitations to balance perception and objective logic, which our cultural and personal psychological subjectivity imposes when we use the strictly left brain thinking style, could be offset by the holistic form of perception associated with altered states of consciousness. To the extent that we come to perceive ourselves fully in the context of that portion of the universal hologram, which is the reflection of ourselves, to the extent that we release ourselves from the prison of subjectivity. Double to the extent in this sentence. So bringing that chunk of words and ideas home, basically what they're saying, I think it can be summed up pretty quickly here. 20th century physics would seem to be revisiting insights belonging to mankind as far back as written records can take us. That part is essentially, I think, the important takeaway here. Mystics, since time immemorial, have been doing this in a more right-brained way, a more intuitive way, and now left brain, analytical brain, physics brain, math brain is catching up. And there's this comment I get often if I have people like Dr. Donald Hoffman on, where people will say, like, they said this 2,000 years ago and 4,000 years ago. In a way, yes. But it's important, I think, to acknowledge the difficulty involved for one, and the practical takeaways that come from making these connections in a left-brained way. This is how you get this stuff from ethereal, philosophical, spiritual ideas into science, and then that leads to actual breakthroughs in our understanding of physical reality, which leads to improvements in technology. I think the kind of improvements and breakthroughs that we can't even begin to imagine right now. All right, 36, self-knowledge. It was axiomatic to the mystic philosophers of old that the first step in personal maturity could be expressed in the aphorism, know thyself. To them, the education of a man undertook as its primary step achievement of an introverted focus so that he learned what was within himself before attempting to approach the outside world. They rightly assumed that He could not effectively evaluate and cope with the world until he fully understood his personal psychological balance. The insights being provided by 20th century psychology in this context, through the use of various kinds of personality testing, seem to be a revalidation of this ancient intuition. But no personality test or series of tests will ever replace the depth and fullness of the perception of self, which can be achieved when the mind alters its state of consciousness sufficiently to perceive the very hologram of itself, which it has projected into the universe in its proper context as part of the universal hologram in a totally holistic and intuitional way. This would seem to be one of the real promises, I think it should be, of the gateway experience from the standpoint of its ability to provide a portal through which, based on months if not years of practice, the individual may pass in his search to find self, personal effectuality, and truth in the larger sense. By the way, I guess I should note that this is the fabled missing page. The version of this paper that was declassified was originally missing this page, which led to a lot of questions like, was the page omitted purposefully? Was it redacted? Is there something so mind-blowing on this page? And then there was an article that Vice did years ago where they did some really cool reporting where they personally reached out to the Monroe Institute and they were like, what's up with this missing page? Do you have the report? Can we have the report from you? And then after some back and forth, Monroe voluntarily gave up the full paper with the missing page. And though I think in the grand scheme of the paper, maybe it's not like the most mind-blowing climactic punchline or chunk of information, I do think it is important and it contains some deeply fascinating info. All right, 37, motivational aspect. It is a step-by-step procedure which involves repetitive practice of the techniques concerned, using each new insight as a means of penetrating further during the next practice session. But the rate of progress is so much faster with the gateway approach than it is with transcendental meditation or other forms of mental self-discipline, and its horizons seem to be so much wider that the discipline needed to practice it would seem to be within the means of even the impatient, result-oriented, skeptical pragmatist of our society. Unlike yoga and other forms of Eastern mental discipline, Gateway does not require the infinite patience and total personal subservience to and faith in a system of discipline designed to absorb all the individual's energies over most of a lifetime. Rather, it will begin to produce at least minimal results within a relatively short time, definitely true in my case, such that enough feedback is available to motivate and energize the individual to continue working with it. Indeed, the speed with which an individual may expect to progress seems less a function of a number of hours spent practicing than it is a question of the speed with which he or she is able to use the insights gained to release anxieties and stresses within both the mind and the body. These points of energy blockage seem to provide the principal barriers to achieving the enhanced energy states and focus of mind needed for rapid progression. The more compulsive, the more uptight the individual may be at the outset, the more barriers he or she will initially encounter to achieving a deep, immediate experience. But as the insights begin to come and the blockages begin to dissolve, the way ahead becomes increasingly clear, and the value of Gateway moves from the status of a matter of intellectual assessment to one of personal experience. And here we are, my friends. Conclusion. There is a sound rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Institutional insights of not only personal, but of a practical and professional nature would seem to be within the bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the Gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within the more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of Gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. A. Begin by using the Gateway Hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemispheric synchronization. B. then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C. Provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual to induce deep auto-hypnotic state at will. That's interesting. D. Use auto-hypnotic suggestion to attain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation in rapidly progressing through Focus 12 exercises. E. Then repeat steps A and B following use of auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. F. Repeat step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after REM sleep state ends. G. Approach Focus 15 and Focus 21 objectives. Escape from time, space, and interact within new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. H. This one's one of my favorites. I've definitely puzzled over this one before. I can't wait to let this one rip and hear what you all think in the comments. H. Use multi-focus approach to solve problem of distortion in terrestrial information gathering trips. This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state, 1 viewing the target object here in space-time, 1 viewing it at Focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, 1 viewing it at Focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. Debrief all 3 and compare data gathered from the 3 points of view. If care is taken to ensure that the 3 all go out of body together in the same environment, their conscious energy systems should resonate in sympathetic oscillation. They can tune into the same target on different planes, dimensions, with greater effectiveness. Insert head explosion GIF. But we are not done. There's a couple brain melters left in these last few points. Point I. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiments to enhance objectivity in out-of-body observation and thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress. J. Be intellectually prepared. This is a good one. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. So evocative of the whole NHI conversation right now. But there's more. This next point in particular. And this one might be the most brain-melting of all. Arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. I don't know if this is speculation. I don't know if this has been done. I don't know what that even means, to be honest with you. I get the point. I get what they're alluding to. But how that can be done, I have no idea. All right. Final point, L. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build... Oh yeah, this continued from the last one. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway into the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. And that is it, my friends. That is the balance of the Gateway Report. But I think we need some reflection, and I think we need some takeaways. I think we need to reassess why this is so still incredibly pertinent and interesting, even over 40 years later. If you're anything like me, your mind at this point is just swimming with ideas and questions. So before we conclude our exploration of this document, there's some really vital reflection that we need to do. At its core, this document is more than just a weird government experiment in consciousness expansion. It represents an attempt to map the connection between the mind, reality, and the very fabric of existence itself. Of course, the document suggests that consciousness is not just an epiphenomena or byproduct of our brains. but that we live in a conscious, interconnected universe. And of course, all of this, if you follow the channel and the philosophy of consciousness at all, strongly harmonizes with the philosophy of people like Dr. Donald Hoffman, Bernardo Kastrup, and Federico Fagin, who also argue that consciousness is not an emergent property of matter, but rather the fundamental basis of reality itself. And another thing that makes this document all the more compelling is the possibility that these techniques are still in use today. According to the recent testimony of UFO whistleblower Jake Barber, there are indications that methods similar to those described in this paper may currently be in use in the training of psionic assets. And if you haven't been following this story and you're interested in this topic, you absolutely have to. A huge part of his story hinges on the idea that these psionic assets are very real and very much in use by the military and aerospace contractors, which obviously implies that all of this consciousness research did not come to an end with the closure of endeavors like Project Stargate. In fact, they may have evolved considerably since then. And on that note, I think some other good closing thoughts are the fact that this reminds us that consciousness is not just some really out there philosophical conversation. It's a real experiential frontier that encompasses everything from the nature of reality and our place in it to the covert strategies employed by intelligence agencies. It encourages us to ask if our minds can truly transcend space and time, and what else we might be capable of as human beings. And of course, that leaves the throbbing question of how much of these questions do we already know the answers to, but we, as the public, are left in the dark because they're hidden behind closed doors within classified programs. But in closing, that's the beautiful thing about this method and about meditation and all these other angles that we have at our disposal for consciousness exploration. You don't need them to tell you what's real. You can experiment with your own consciousness and decide for yourself. And with that, if you found this thought-provoking, do tickle that algorithm, like, sub, comment, share. Check out the Third Eye Drops podcast wherever you listen to those. We've got hundreds of mind melds with really brilliant beings that will never be posted here. And we'd love to have you in the Wonder Lodge at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. It's the best way to support the show, and you also get rewards like a patron-only Discord server. We do a book club. We do Zoom hangs. You can get stickers, pins, shirts, and more. Massive, excessive love to all the patrons, and much love to all of you watching, my friends. We'll see you in the next one.